Hello, this is Greg Smalley with Pod 366, a weird movies podcast, joined today by a cast of L. Rob Hubbard to my left on my screen and Giles Edwards below me, coming from Montreal. Giles,
Yes,
how are you? Because you're in Montreal.
I am in Montreal and indeed am a couple hundred feet from where I was last time I spoke in Montreal, having been shuffled to a different part of the building owned by the Airbnb hosts.
It looks like a cell.
It's
Very
cozy.
similar.
There's a whole lot of room over there. So yeah, this is kind of the smallest angle possible, but that's where the desk is. So
And Robert, of course, is coming from home. I think,
Yes, the clutter said the cluttered background of said that I'm never going to get away from it. So
and I'm coming from Caligari town as always. All right. Actually, last time I was in Bronson Canyon, but now I'm back in Caligari town. So today we don't have a lot to talk about because it's very strange how movie releases work. Some weeks there are 10 things we want to talk about, and some weeks we're scrounging to find any topic to talk about. It would have been a good day to have a guest, but we didn't have anybody scheduled. So we are just going to talk about what's available, and then we'll let Giles talk a bit about what he's seen at Fantasia recently. And I did want to say, Robert, you were going to be on today to talk about a release that has been pushed back, correct?
yes, again, I think when we originally scheduled this, the Andrzej Zawadzki box set was due to be released at this date, and I think like 3 weeks or so ago, so they announced that they were bumping it to the end of August now, but for a good reason because apparently it started as a 2 disc release, and people let Eureka know that they weren't too happy about that. So then it got delayed, and they were bumping it up to 3 discs. And they ran into Matt into a problem with one of the films, I guess, in terms of the transfer. So now it was scheduled to be out at the end of July, and then they decided they bump it another month. But then it's now a 4 disc release with the and we'll talk about this like about a month from now, with 3 films and a documentary. So, and it looks, I know that they've sent screeners out. The review site DVD Beaver, I guess, put up screen captures and a review. So it looks as though that it will be out at the end of August. But in case it gets bumped again, we might get a 5th disc out of it. Who knows?
Sometimes this happens. I'll schedule things and they get bumped back. It's always, I'm not in the DVD Blu-ray releasing business, but it's always surprising to me how these things often come near the deadline and then they discover some sort of technical problem and have to push it back. It happens more frequently than people would suggest, which is one reason why I'm always kind of shy about talking about big new releases. Places like Criterion are usually pretty good about getting things out when they announce them, but it does happen quite a bit that there'll be some kind of technical difficulty at the last minute. But
Oh
let's
yeah.
see what we have to talk about this week. I'm going to have the wrong image up. That's something I want to talk about later. But so of theatrical releases in theaters, and probably not in many theaters, this is pretty much the only one we have to discuss. And do you guys recognize this still?
I think that's John Hamm.
It is John Hamm, yes.
Okay,
Okay, well, this is a movie called Corner Office, and it is very sort of a very small release. I don't know if they might have had big plans for it, but it's about a man in an office who discovers a room, a corner office, and when he's a corporate drone, you know, in a very sort of office space type environment, and in this covered corner office, he discovers he can be super productive. However, the catch is no one else in the office can see this corner office, and they believe that he might be insane. And it has some absurdist touches and so forth. The problem is, although the synopsis sounds pretty surreal and like it's ripe for satire, the early reviews were pretty negative. I think it's 11% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That is pretty negative.
does he, by chance, does he end up going through a portal and ending up in some actor's head by chance?
That would be a good twist. Somebody ought to write a movie like that.
Yeah, it just sort of slides into those sections of adaptation without, you know, any explanation otherwise.
So I don't think I've heard about this, although the present with John Hamm being in it, it should be interesting. He's started watching like a lot of projects with him just coincidentally, and I know his choice of roles, I guess, is very interesting, but somehow the overall projects overall may be kind of like lackluster, but he's by far the best reason to watch something like this.
Yeah, I think he has a following, and he's definitely a good actor. Wasn't he in Mary, Marcy, Marlene, and so forth as a cult leader? That was him, right?
Mm, I've not seen I've not seen that one. What did I just recently saw? I know that he was one of the voices in the Congress. Almost got 10 years ago. And I'm just, what was I watching recently that he was in? God, I can't.
I don't know, but I think he's been in some TV projects, and he does have a good following.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's well respected as a actor and a craftsman.
Who's if I can ask who spearheaded, who's the director of this? I don't even think I've heard of this.
Joaquin Back, according to IMDb.
Yeah.
And it looks like the IMDb rating based on 83 reactions is 7.6 out of 10. So
that's good, but it's because, you know, only people who are highly attracted to it have seen it, and it will drop, certainly. Okay, well, we didn't have much to say about that. Apparently, I'm the only one who saw the trailer for that. So
I was just about to, then it turned 3:00. I swear.
Okay. Well, this next one is one that not many people can see because it's only playing in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I have seen it because I saw a screener copy actually before the final, a rough copy before the final cut was made of The Wheel of Heaven, which is from Joe Badon, our friend, was on, I believe, our second or third episode.
Really on.
And he was talking about, among other things, the Wheel of Heaven project. So it's finally completed and coming out, debuting in New Orleans tomorrow, or probably as you're listening or watching this today. And we will have the details on our website for that. But once again, if you're in New Orleans, you probably know. It's like the New Marini Theater. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Marigny. Giles, you have seen, now what this was is it was originally going to be a web series or mini series, and he made, I think, 4 episodes that were about 25 to 20 minutes each, and eventually decided it would be better to mash them together and treat it as a feature, which I think is probably more marketable and will allow him to go to film festivals more easily with it. The first episode was sort of a standalone episode called Blood of the Dinosaurs, which I know Giles saw.
Yes. I covered it, gosh, last year.
Right. So he put that out and then was able to raise money off that short film to produce the rest of it. And as it says, it says over 257 possible endings. So the sort of conceit is that it's a woman following one of those choose your own adventure books, and she reads the text and it says do X or do Y, go to the party, or walk off and search for the meaning of existence. And she says, well, I'll go to the party. And then she goes to the party, and in the party is a bunch of strange characters, including a guy, most notably a Asian guy in Snow White drag. So if you've seen a Joe Badon movie, there's all sorts of craziness in it. And I think one of the sort of there's a lot to enjoy, but it flips, very short attention span, flips all over the place. So the choose your own adventure thing, where it's very segmented, is kind of a good tactic, I think, for a Joe Badon movie. There are things like there is a little creepy children's show with a creepy children's show host. There are he takes time out to go through a fake YouTube with a bunch of sort of porny parodies of porn movies that are based around the concept of actually reproducing. So there'll be like a bee with a pollinating a flower and things like that. And there's also a sort of Star Trek type parody thrown in there, and it's all very confusing. And it also has a lot of behind the scenes content where Joe will be talking to his lead character about how she's going to play the role and whether they should cut this scene or not, and stuff like that. And it's just very jam-packed with a lot of stuff. And the other thing is, Joe manages to make these movies for like four-figure budgets, and they look like movies that have been made for five-figure budgets. And I mean that as a compliment, seriously, because they do look much better than the budget would let you believe, because he's an artist and has a great visual sense. So Giles, you have seen Blood of the Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I think you talked about it on the first pod with him, but
yeah, briefly. Yeah, it's tucked in the middle of I think it was my second omnibus review from my first omnibus review from last year's coverage of Fantasia when it had reopened at last. So it was that section I can recommend, and that section I think is probably a good quarter, if presuming it's there in its entirety. I can say at least a quarter of this movie that we're talking about now is worth your time. Say that not having seen the other 3/4, so I don't know.
The main character in the other 3 was the little girl performer in Blood of the Dinosaurs.
Okay.
And I thought I just sort of thought Blood of the Dinosaurs looked kind of like Wes Anderson doing children's TV show that had been written by David Lynch, kind of thing to it. So.
Yeah, those are some good names to toss around to describe that
Okay. I'm
short at the
intrigued.
time. Yeah, it's going to be intriguing, certainly.
I mean, not having seen the previous work. I've heard the name, but I've not seen any of his previous work. I said this sound. I mean, seriously, this does sound intriguing. So.
Oh, it's very crazy, and it's it's an easy watch. So you can catch some of his work on Tubi, I know for sure. The God Inside My Ear was on Tubi, and I imagine Sister Tempest made it to Tubi, but I haven't checked that out yet. And I have had directors tell me that Tubi is a very lucrative, surprisingly lucrative venue for them to show their movies, particularly when your movie, it costs so little to make. It's kind of easy to get your money back via Tubi. So we do love Tubi.
Yeah, I've heard that confirmed by directors that I've chatted with. In mentioning that fact, I've either gotten yeses or nods from them. So that I am increasingly convinced at the truth of that statement.
Okay, well, again, New Orleans people only for that, but it will probably appear at other festivals and then probably show up on Tubi eventually. So the only sort of DVD/Blu-ray release of any interest this week is this one, Nightbreed, which is a movie about a serial killer and a town full of mutant monsters who are all depicted here on the cover. I like the guy with the big forehead and the nice goatee. Looks a little bit like a crescent moon type character. This has been released many times now on 4K Ultra HD, as movies nowadays so frequently are. Before we talk about the movie, I know I asked this question a lot. I don't recall, Robert, do you have a 4K UHD player?
No, I have not. At some point, I guess as 4K and UHD kind of gets more prevalent, I will have to make the jump to that and a 4K television. But I don't know. As far as like format changes, I think this is like the umpteenth sixth or seventh format change, I guess in my lifetime, and it's kind of like anymore. I guess anymore to start like rebuying things, except for the upgrade in picture quality. If I were 20 years younger, I probably would. I probably would be into it. As it is now, with my eyesight starting to fail, it's kind of like 4K, 1080. It's kind of like getting set. That it's not that important to me anymore. But I can see where it would be for some.
I'm with you. I think Blu-ray is more than crisp enough for me, and to be frank, for a lot of things, DVD is just fine. Especially if you're talking about older stuff that wasn't originally shot in 4K or TV
Right.
stuff like that. DVD is just fine for most things.
I mean, I was going to say part of it, like in terms of older films, not that this is like early 90s, so I guess now it would be old. I mean, picture quality is I guess is important. I'm not trying to downgrade that, but a lot of these films at the time, I guess in terms of effects, they're not. You can kind of get into the sharpness of the picture, to where you can kind of see like the blemishes on people's faces. some of the effects work may not hold up because it's not, because at the time in doing a film, there is the point where a lot of it is illusions. You kind of knew like what you could get away with in terms of the picture quality, and some things you at the time you could get away with. Once you start bumping it up on older films, once you start bumping it up to like 4K, 8K, to where you can kind of see everything. I've had reviews of people complaining about like the quality of the effects, and it's just like, well, it's not really designed to be sharp, to be as sharp as quality. It was kind of like what the state of the art was then. But I'm sorry, old man ranting. I don't want to turn.
I'm with you. It's like I don't know. I'm definitely a cinephile, but I'm more in it for the stories and the themes and sort of the artistry. I'm not really a guy that is a videophile / audiophile that has to have the newest, best, sharpest material for anything. Giles, any contrary thoughts?
I mean, I broadly agree with what you're both saying, with one major exception I'll make vis-a-vis video quality. Animation, Son of the White Mare on 4K was the best it has ever looked, ever. And we saw it projected very nicely on 4K. I have the 4K Blu-ray, and it's just wonderful to behold. It is a sort of simple style animation, but it is so perfectly captured with the increased resolution. And I think the transfer was approved by the director not too long before he passed away. He was in his older fella. I am happy to get a new rig every 5 or so years, presuming it has backwards compatibility. So if I'm getting a souped up new player, so long as it still plays DVDs and earlier iterations of Blu-ray, then I'm happy enough to do that, because there are some things I'll want to get new, some things that haven't been released yet, but I'll want to be able to play all my old stuff without having to stack different machines together, which is a criticism I've had with most technology for the past 3 decades, not generally having this be the case, but with DVD and through 8K even stuff, if you get an 8K player, it'll play DVDs happily. So the fact that they'll do that is good for me. My annoyance with technological advancement is, for me, stereophonic sound is fine. I have 2 ears, and the audio can come in from 2 channels with sufficient sophistication for my purposes. However, particularly with streaming and newer things, they're all pre-rigged for 5.1, and stereo is becoming more and more of an afterthought, which I find odd, especially considering a lot of people watch streaming on headphones, which have 2 channels. But that is not a battle with YouTube. That's something else entirely.
And the reason we spent so much time talking about 4K Ultra HD is because I haven't seen Nightbreed, and I have no comments about it. Have either of you?
I saw this when it was out in theaters, this was like 91, I think 91, which is, and it's based on Clive Barker novella called Cabal. Is it called Cabal?
I think so. Yeah.
And I know, like in recent years, that there was always saying there was like a better, like a director's cut, and which has been released, I think called the Cabal cut, or under several different names, which I've not seen as of yet. Nightbreed was okay. It was okay. In terms of Barker's work, I think Hellraiser, the first one, was his best work as far as a director. Nightbreed is a mess, or especially the theatrical cut, but it was kind of like a wonderful mess, if that makes sense.
Love
it. And to be honest, at some point I probably will see like the Cabal cut to see if it's a more coherent movie, but I mean, this has its fan base, a rabid fan base. I like it, but I'm not that rabid about it. Is it Guile? Have you seen the Skiles?
I have not seen this, although I'm already regretting. I'm checking it out on IMDb. It's 1990, so you're about right. And it has this great tagline: Lori thought she knew everything about her boyfriend. Lori was wrong. And I think that's just so much cooler than just, hey, look at all these guys hanging out on a field cover they opted for. But
Well, this was kind of because it was sort of sold at the time. So the whole thing with the creatures, it wasn't this. That wasn't like the selling point uh, of the film, and it's kind of, and not to get too nerdy about it, it's kind of a rework. It's a the novella and the movie is a reworking of an earlier Barker project done in Britain called, I want to say Transmutations, which was like a really low budget movie done after Rawhead Rex. And this was, and Nightbreed was kind of more of a retelling, larger budget and better story. And I guess at that time, like the film, the original theatrical version was just recut, sections left out of it. Didn't make a lot of sense, although David Cronenberg is the villain in this, which is interesting. And there's a lot, and you can tell from this, there's a lot of interesting makeup. Like I said, I don't know if this collector's edition, and I'm guessing that's probably Scream Factory. I would assume that they would probably have both versions on the disc, but I'd have to look that up to see. It's, if you haven't seen it, it's worth taking a look at.
Sure. Let's leave it at that. And
it's got 4 discs, so it probably has everything.
Oh yeah, okay, so it's got everything.
That's gonna be thorough.
And more.
so we have very little to say about this one. This is just a little news tidbit that's more probably goes into the rumors category, and sort of a minor rumor to boot, but it's something I thought we'd cover since we had such a light week. Although we have spent quite a bit of time talking about the first 3 minor movies. So anyway, what this is Zach Snyder, or as our beloved recently deceased Alfred Aker would call him, Hack Snyder, did an interview with Letterboxd about the movie Sucker Punch, which was reviewed when it came out on our site by Alex Kittle, in which he said he would like to do a director's cut of it because the original ending he shot was cut by the studios because it was too weird, which caught my attention because our complaint about the movie was that it was a little weird, but not weird enough. So a weirder version would be quite appealing. Of course, this is a movie which has a lot of young actresses led by Emily Browning in some scantily clad outfits, fighting a bunch of video game type monsters. And I think they're in a mental institution, and I haven't seen it. Have either of you seen Sucker Punch?
Nope.
Yeah. When it came to like on cable and such, I've sat through it. It's like most of Zack Snyder's work. Visually, it's interesting. I like most of the actors in it. Overall the story, I don't know if you really need a director's cut. In terms of Zack Snyder's work, I don't really think that you would really need a director's cut of anything that he's done, but that's just my personal opinion. And one of the things that you notice is that, like, after about, say, 10 years or so, when films come out that didn't, I think it did okay, but overall it just kind of got drubbed critically. About every 10 years or so, there comes a reassessment of it, or like the director will drop like, oh, that's what I wanted to do, but they wouldn't let me in. It's a much better film. I think that ending would be interesting. Would it make Sucker Punch a better film? I have my doubts, because somehow I don't think like the last 5 minutes or so of it is going to make up for the previous 70 minutes or so, but that's just me.
All right. Giles, did you see Sucker Punch?
I have not seen Sucker
I
Punch.
didn't would have.
I don't think I've seen much of Mr. Snyder's work.
It's a
Somehow.
well, everything's a masterpiece. I said, like,
I
like the
understand
Snyder,
he,
like the Snyder cut of Justice League. I said there's more. I said every director's cut is a masterpiece.
yeah, I know he has avid followers just from, you know, vague attention I pay to the internet, but
20, I mean, like, yeah, 20 more minutes of Watchmen just makes it a master. 20 more minutes of Watchmen makes it a masterpiece.
okay, I have seen Watchmen, and I actually I've seen like the whole whatever, like 4 hour and 15 minute thing, and that compared to the straight up movie cut, which has none of the, you know, because, well, if you look at the book, it's got all that supplemental stuff as well that's kind of between and behind and in the past of the story, and that's all very, you know, I find that interesting. I think it's a great book, and it, you know, nicely builds the complete world. But as a unit of entertainment, the book could work in briefer form as just the contemporary, you know, linear story from the start to finish with the murder. And similarly, the mere 2.5 hour cut of Zack Snyder's Watchmen with just that is really good and really just, you know, nice and tight as a standalone kind of thing. But I'm happy enough that there's that whole rest of it, you know, the whole Black Flag thing, the whole little sides and so on is also there for those who are interested in being that complete. Yeah. So
like I said, the only thing I think the one film of his that actually that I think does benefit from extra credit was Dawn of the Dead remake. It's just kind of its own. Well, it's kind of its own thing. But Watchmen, like I said, visually it's great. It's great. I have sort of issues with this, with the story and the approach of it. I don't even want to mention Justice League. That's its own kettle of fish.
I thought you didn't want to mention the giant blue wang in Watchmen. So
anyway, features as prominently in the book.
That's actually a part. That is actually a part. I didn't really have a problem with the giant blue wang, and I mean, it's part of the story. There's just other choices that I have issue with, but that's kind of like in terms of comic adaptations. It's trying to do it as like even as a 2.5 hour movie. I mean, it's just going to have its own issues. I think the HBO kind of sequel follow-up to it, I think approached it much better, so kind of handled it much better. But
all right, well, we are down to about
that.
Minutes, so Giles is very quickly going to recommend some things from Fantasia. And Giles, also I had a question that popped up just before we got on the 366weirdmovies.com. Do you know if that Kura how, I don't know how you pronounce it, the anime that you saw is going to be distributed?
Yukaba, how it's going to be distributed? That's a great question.
Don't know. I didn't.
I might be able to investigate. I think I'm followed on Twitter by the official Twitter presence of that film, so I could probably inquire of them.
Well,
it was a long interview, and I was kind of pushing my time, so I didn't quite.
so speaking of pushing time, go ahead and give us some recommendations in the last 3 minutes here.
Okay, well, one of the highlights I wrote about at some length was Hippo was absolutely fantastic. I'd say it's not as weird as Divinity in an obvious way, but it certainly felt similarly odd in an overall experience kind of thing, just living in that strange little house in that black and white world for the 100 minutes or so. Yeah, because I'm working on the big thing. Did a Late Night with the Devil, fascinating Canadian documentary about the Satanic Panic, and the book that kind of largely kicked that off. Memories of Michelle Remembers, from Michelle, whoever she was, and Dr. Posner, the psychologist who worked with her on that book, and the focus mostly on the two families there, Posner and his wife, and then Michelle and her sisters, but with obvious exploration of some of the spillover effect and just how incredibly bad for everyone and society that whole nonsense was. I have seen, let's see, Night Owl and the Child were last night, double feature of South Korean big budget, one of them a historical political costume thriller thing set in the mid 17th century, featuring a blind acupuncturist. So now I've seen one of those, and the one following that was more contemporary, big violence, fun time nonsense about the wrong man, double crossings, gun violence, enigmatic hitman guardian kind of character. Kurayukaba was obviously a highlight. I quite liked Where the Devil Roams. That sort of met mixed reactions from other reviewers I chatted with. I think it's very much in keeping with as the filmmakers themselves talk about, the tiny movies that they're working on and, making on their own terms. And I thought it succeeded more than it didn't. I don't know if I was in the minority, but I definitely wasn't in the overwhelming majority of at least critics I spoke to. It was definitely very well received at the full house of, I think it's like there's 750 people can fit in the main theater venue, and that was packed. And I'm down to 1 minute, so I'll talk about Hundreds of Beavers and then Hundreds of Beavers, which I saw one time each for a total of 200 of Beavers. And that was pretty much just as good the second time around, which is very hard to do with, shall we say, a idiotic comedy like that. So I have 4 contacts now within that filmmaking group, so hopefully we can get them on at some point and maybe even screen them locally near where I live, since I'm near an independent theater and they're always looking for that. So,
and it has been picked up for international distribution at least, and I assume they have domestic US as well.
Yeah, so
we don't know. And so we're about to run out of time. Thank you, Giles. Thank you, Robert. I thought we wouldn't have anything to talk about, and we ended up going right up to the wire. So we're gonna sign off right now. Thank you for listening.